Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that I think could be a real game changer for a lot of you listening. It's the ADHD Management Guide for Entrepreneurs. Really fantastic resource, and it's completely free over at PoweredADHD.com.
Yeah, it really is. And look, if you're an entrepreneur, you're out there building something, and you have ADHD, or maybe you just suspect you might. Well, you know the deal, right?
Oh, yeah.
The unique challenges, but also those incredible strengths that often come with it.
Absolutely.
And this deep dive, it's not just about coping. It's about really figuring out how to unlock that potential, how to thrive.
Exactly. That's precisely why we're here. We're going deep into this guide, not just reading it out, obviously, but pulling out the actionable gold.
Right.
You know, the core insights, the practical stuff that helps you cut through all the information overload and really focus on what moves your business forward.
Think of it as like your express lane to understanding how to make your specific brain wiring work for you.
I like that. Express lane. So what are we covering?
Well, we're hitting some really key areas the guide breaks down so well. We'll get into some brain science stuff, dopamine, executive function, this idea of an interest-based nervous system.
Okay.
And then motivation strategies, practical systems you can literally start using like today.
Sounds good.
Yeah. I think there are going to be some real aha moments.
Yeah.
The guide's packed with some surprising and really useful stuff.
All right, let's lay that groundwork then. Understanding the ADHD brain. Section 1 in the guide, basically. Dopamine and motivation. It's that classic thing, isn't it? You can get totally lost in a project you love for hours, hyper-focused.
Totally.
But then some other task maybe seems simpler, just feels impossible to start, like climbing a mountain. What's actually happening there?
Yeah, and the guy explains this really well. It comes down to dopamine. That's a key neurotransmitter, for reward, motivation, especially in the parts of the brain dealing with planning and getting things done.
Right, the prefrontal cortex and all that.
Exactly. And in the ADHD brain, the way dopamine signals works a bit differently. This leads to what the guy calls an interest-based nervous system.
Okay, interest-based. What does that mean in practice?
It means your brain's ignition, let's say, it's more likely to fire up when a task has genuine interest for you, or novelty, or it's challenging in the right way, or there's a real sense of urgency.
So that feeling of being unmotivated, it's not actually a character flaw. It's more like the engine needs a different kind of key.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. It's not that you lack desire. It's that your brain requires different conditions to activate. It needs that spark.
Okay.
And dopamine's role, it's bigger than just motivation, right? It impacts those crucial executive functions too.
Ah, yes. Executive functions,
Wow.
the brain's management system.
Yeah, things like starting tasks, staying focused, holding information in your head, working memory, managing your emotions, even how you perceive time passing.
Wow.
So when dopamine signaling is, let's say, irregular, all those functions can fluctuate, often depending on how engaging you find the task at hand.
Which leads right into this fascinating idea from the guide, the entrepreneur's ADHD paradox.
Love this part.
It highlights these incredible strengths you often see: amazing creative problem solving, being more comfortable with risk, thinking outside the box, even being great in a crisis.
Totally. Superpowers, almost. Yeah. But, and this is the paradox, right? These strengths often live side by side with some significant challenges, like really variable performance. Being on when interested, off when not, difficulty with follow-through on the less shiny tasks, finding it hard to switch contexts, switch gears between different kinds of work, and just the sheer challenge of building sustainable, consistent systems.
Okay, so that's the landscape. The crucial bit is, how do we work with this? The guide offers strategies for dopamine regulation. Let's talk strategic reward engineering. What's that about?
Yeah, so the core idea here is that the ADHD brain really responds well to immediate feedback. So if you intentionally link those less interesting tasks with small, instant rewards, micro rewards, you're basically giving your brain that quick dopamine hit it's looking for.
Like a little treat for getting started.
Kind of, or finishing a step. The guide also suggests things like visual progress trackers. Seeing progress tangibly, that's rewarding in itself and fuels more motivation.
That makes sense. Celebrating small wins. Okay, what about interest and novelty injection? How do we do that?
This is about actively finding ways to make routine stuff more engaging. Can you turn it into a game? Can I beat my time from yesterday? Or reframe it, maybe see it as a puzzle, find a new angle.
Gamifying the mundane. I like it. The guide also mentions energy-based task alignment.
Right. This is huge. It's about tuning into your own natural energy cycles. What are your peak focus times? Schedule your tough, demanding work then.
Instead of trying to force deep work when you're naturally flagging.
Exactly. Work with your energy, not against it. And related to that is strategic urgency creation.
Creating deadlines.
Yeah, sometimes artificial ones, but making them feel real. Using countdown timers, you can see. That immediate pressure can sometimes provide the focus needed.
And the micro-step approach. Sounds like breaking things down.
Very much so, especially for those big projects that feel overwhelming. Break them into tiny, tiny steps, so small that starting feels almost effortless.
Takes the intimidation factor down.
Right. Each tiny win builds momentum. And lastly, under dopamine support, there's physiological dopamine support. It's not just mental tricks, is it?
No, definitely not. The mind-body connection is key here. The guide suggests things like regular movement breaks, even short ones, paying attention to your posture. Even things like brief cold exposure can apparently boost alertness.
Interesting. Okay, moving on to executive functions. The guide calls it the brain's command center. Why is understanding this so vital for entrepreneurs with ADHD?
Well, the key insight, I think, is the inconsistency. For folks with ADHD, these crucial skills, planning, organizing, starting things, checking your work, they tend to fluctuate. And that inconsistency can create this big gap between, your brilliant vision and your ability to actually execute it day in, day out.
Yeah, I can see that. What specific challenges does the guide highlight for entrepreneurs here?
Several big ones. Planning and prioritizing, like breaking down those huge goals into steps and deciding what comes first, that can be really tough.
Okay.
Working memory is another. Just holding information in your head while you're working with it impacts following instructions, remembering conversations.
Right, the mental clipboard gets overloaded easily.
Exactly. Then there's cognitive flexibility, smoothly switching between tasks, and self-monitoring, just being aware of how you're doing and adjusting course.
And you can totally see how that plays out, right?
Yeah.
Decision paralysis, maybe. That frustrating inconsistency, maybe struggling to see the big picture and manage the details.
Yeah, and the guide mentions the sheer energy drain. Just trying to constantly compensate for these differences takes a toll.
But it's not all challenges, right? The guide talks about strengthening these functions.
Absolutely. It emphasizes things we know are good for the brain generally, but maybe especially crucial here. Regular exercise, mindfulness practices for focus and awareness, getting enough sleep, huge one, and finding ways to manage stress.
Good foundations. Okay, let's shift to another big one, time blindness. I think a lot of entrepreneurs with ADHD will recognize this. It's more than just being late sometimes, isn't it?
Oh, fundamentally different. Yeah. The guide explains it as a neurological difference in how the brain perceives and manages time's passage. It's not about willpower. It's like the internal clock just works differently or not reliably.
And the symptoms listed in the guide, they really resonate. Chronic lateness, sure, but also consistently underestimating how long tasks will actually take.
Yeah, or that time warp feeling when you're hyper-focused, right? Hours feel like minutes.
Totally. And that now, not now thinking, like if it's not happening right now, it barely exists in your planning horizon.
Exactly. And for entrepreneurs, the impact is obvious, isn't it? Missed deadlines, late deliveries, that now, not now thing leading to constant fire drills.
Yeah, putting out fires instead of strategic work. And maybe spending way too much time on one thing and neglecting others.
So practical strategies. How does the guide suggest we manage this unreliable internal clock? It really pushes for using external time anchors, things you can see, visual timers counting down, multiple alarms, even analog clocks where you can literally see time moving.
Making time visible, tangible.
Yes. And also time tracking reality checks, like actually log how long things take versus your estimate. You start to build your own personal translation guide for your time perception.
That's clever. Calibrating yourself against reality.
It is. The guide also suggests a time multiplication rule, especially for new tasks. Multiply your estimate, maybe by 1.5, maybe 2, and always add buffer time.
Buffer time is life.
Isn't it just? And finally, calendar visualization, really using your calendar. Time blocking, color coding, and crucially, scheduling the in-between stuff too, travel time, transition time between meetings.
Not just the meetings themselves. Makes sense. Okay, another key area, working memory. The guide uses that helpful clipboard analogy. Can you unpack that?
Yeah, think of working memory as that temporary mental space, like a clipboard where you hold info you're actively using. For ADHD folks, that clipboard tends to be, well, smaller, holds less info at once.
Okay.
And the info on it is maybe less sticky. It falls off more easily, gets bumped off by distractions, or just fades quicker. Juggling lots of things on there is harder.
So how does that show up day to day for an entrepreneur?
The guide gives some really clear examples. Difficulty following multi-step directions without constantly checking back. Struggling to track all the points in a complex conversation, having to reread emails or documents several times to really get it.
Yeah, that feeling of what was I just doing after an interruption?
Exactly. And it can impact learning complex things too. You might get the individual pieces but struggle to connect them all to see the whole picture.
Super disruptive.
Yeah.
So what support strategies does the guide offer? A big one is externalize information. Get it out of your head. Use notes, voice memos, mind map, checklists, templates, whatever works for you.
Don't rely on the faulty clipboard.
Precisely. Also, break down instructions into really small numbered steps, or use flowcharts, make it visual.
Okay.
Using visual anchors helps too. Sticky notes in key places, color coding, physical reminders, and even just verbalization, saying things out loud, repeating instructions back, recording voice notes to yourself. It helps solidify the information.
We talked about dopamine earlier, but the guide really emphasizes this interest-based nervous system. Seems like a really core concept for understanding ADHD motivation.
Absolutely central. The guide really drives home that it's not a motivation deficit, it's a motivation regulation difference.
Okay.
The ADHD brain isn't primarily driven by, say, perceived importance or long-term goals in the same way. It's much more powerfully activated by genuine interest, novelty, challenge, urgency, those immediate factors.
Which explains that motivation paradox, again, intense hyperfocus on something fascinating.
Right, for hours.
Versus total inertia on something essential but boring. It's not laziness, it's brain chemistry.
Exactly. And the guide highlights things that tend to activate this system. Curiosity, creativity, competition, problem solving, helping people, social connection.
Things that provide that spark.
Yeah. It also talks about importance blindness, where you know intellectually a task is important, but you just don't feel that inner drive to do it.
Ooh. Yeah.
And again, that leads to the inconsistent performance and the focus often being on the now versus the not now.
So instead of fighting it constantly, how do we work with this system?
Great question. The guide suggests interest infusion. Find a personal angle on the task. Gamify it. Reframe it as an experiment. Inject your interest somehow.
Make it matter to you personally.
Right. Also, modifying your environment can help. Change the lighting, put on music, work somewhere different for a bit, inject novelty.
Okay.
Task pairing is another good one. Do the boring task while listening to an engaging podcast or using a fidget tool. And integrating movement pacing, standing desk, short active breaks.
Keep the stimulation levels up. Makes sense. Emotional regulation is another area the guide covers. It's more than just feeling things strongly. Yeah.
Yeah, much more. Emotional dysregulation in ADHD is about difficulty managing the intensity and expression of emotions. Quick shifts in mood, trouble inhibiting impulsive reactions.
Okay. And the guide mentions specific challenges.
Common ones include emotional impulsivity, firing off that angry email, making a rash decision.
Regretting it later.
Always. Rejection-sensitive dysphoria, or RSD. That really intense, painful reaction to perceived criticism or rejection.
That sounds tough.
It is. Also, lower frustration tolerance and just feeling completely overwhelmed by emotions, sometimes emotional flooding.
Especially tough in the high-stakes world of entrepreneurship. What strategies does the guide offer?
A key one is developing metacognitive awareness. Learning to notice and label your emotions as they happen. Creating that pause between feeling and acting.
The pause is crucial.
It really is. The guide mentions the Istapi technique. Stop, take a breath, observe, proceed as a quick tool. Also, physiological resets, deep breathing, splashing cold water on your face, quick burst of movement.
Bringing the body back online.
Exactly. And cognitive reframing, challenging those automatic negative thoughts that often fuel intense emotions.
The guide specifically mentions managing RSD too.
Yes. Strategies like consciously questioning your interpretation of events. Is rejection really what's happening here? Keeping a validation file of positive feedback to counteract negative feelings. Clear communication to avoid misunderstandings. Even gradual exposure to potentially triggering situations.
And managing your environment to reduce triggers, having calming tools nearby.
Right. Setting yourself up for success emotionally.
Okay, finally, the guide loops back to dopamine and motivation, linking it all together. What other reward-based techniques does it add?
It really emphasizes immediate reinforcement. Consciously paradigming finishing something, even small, with something instantly gratifying, maybe a 5-minute break doing something you enjoy, a sensory reward. It also suggests creating actual gamification systems for your work points, levels, challenges. And having celebration rituals, actively acknowledging achievements, big or small. Visual progress tracking comes up again too, that ongoing reinforcement.
And for sustaining motivation long term, beyond the immediate hits.
It's about that energy and focus optimization we touched on. Using high-intensity work bursts when you have energy. Scheduling tasks based on your energy levels. Building in scheduled novelty, intentionally changing things up, rotating projects, themed days maybe.
Keeping it fresh.
Exactly. And, crucially, constantly reconnecting your daily grind back to your bigger purpose. Why are you doing this? Keep that big why visible.
Wow. Okay, this has been incredibly insightful, just covering this first part of the ADHD management guide. We've gone from brain science basics to really practical stuff for motivation and managing challenges.
Yeah, and it's important to stress, this is really just scratching the surface, isn't it?
Totally. The full guide, again, free at PoweredADHD.com, goes way deeper into actual implementation, strategies for adapting your business, designing your day.
Right. It gets into things like strategic adaptations, designing your business so it requires less of what you struggle with. Things like role optimization, strategic delegation, identifying those ADHD tax tasks.
ADHD tax tasks, I like that. And flexible work design, building boundaries.
Yeah. And then there's the whole daily framework section. How to build a supportive routine, morning activation, structuring your workday with energy matching, and evening close down. But crucially, how to make it flexible, not rigid.
That flexibility is key. It also has a whole system for managing complex projects, right? That 5-stage thing.
Yes. Capture, clarify, chunk, activate, review, and reset. A really solid process tailored for the ADHD brain trying to tackle big things. Plus tools for actually getting started on tasks.
And environment design. Optimizing your physical space, your digital space, managing sensory input, even strategies for switching environments.
Super practical. And the tech tools section, suggesting specific types of apps for visual tracking, focus, distraction blocking, external brain systems, calendars, but with advice on not getting overwhelmed by the tech itself.
Rule of 3, integration, friction assessment.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Then there's the whole physiological foundation piece we touched on, deep dives into optimizing sleep, movement, nutrition, stress management, all foundational for managing ADHD.
Absolutely critical. And finally, accountability systems and, importantly, recovery protocols.
Yes, because systems will break down sometimes. It's about how you get back on track. It covers accountability partners, coaches, masterminds, strategic transparency.
And that 24-hour reset protocol. Acknowledge, reset physiologically, reset environment, refresh priorities, start small, plus micro-recovery practices.
It really shows how all these pieces, the 7 components the guide outlines, work together. It's holistic. Business design, structured task management, environment, tech, physiology, accountability, and recovery.
Building a system around your ADHD, not trying to pretend it doesn't exist.
Exactly. It's about creating the conditions where your unique strengths, the creativity, the problem solving, can actually shine.
This guide really does feel like an incredibly valuable roadmap. And again, we've just skimmed it. You can get the whole thing absolutely free at PoweredADHD.com. Highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah, definitely do. And maybe hold on to that final thought from the guide. ADHD isn't just a list of challenges. It holds real potential advantages for entrepreneurs. With the right support systems, you can leverage those unique perspectives.
So, thinking about everything we've discussed, all the insights from the guide, here's a thought for you listening. Now that you maybe understand your brain a bit better, what's one small, concrete adaptation you could make, maybe even today, to start working with your ADHD instead of feeling like you're constantly fighting it?
That's the perfect takeaway. Just one small step to start with. Find that step.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We really hope it's giving you some valuable insights and maybe some actionable steps. Don't forget to grab that free guide, PoweredADHD.com.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time, take care.